Why are you like this?
What? What's wrong?
Nothing. It is your hair. And you didn't tell me you're taking it off.
No, I didn't tell you I was taking it off.
I'm not saying you're not pretty, but I love the long hair.
Well, I don't have long hair. I have short hair.
I was astonished when I saw her. It's embarrassing. She looks older. I didn't believe she's Lisa I used to know. If we are going to be together, she have to wear her wig. She's not gonna go with her short hair.
What?
He couldn't believe his eyes. Lisa stood there, hair short and bare, like a version of herself he had never seen before. Daniel froze mid-step, his mouth slightly open, heart skipping in confusion. All the long nights he spent imagining her flowing hair framing her face, the image he had carried in his head for years, vanished in a single moment. Lisa, on the other hand, let out a quiet sigh, feeling the cool air on her scalp, a mix of relief and nervousness coursing through her. It was hot, it was itchy, and finally, it felt like a small taste of freedom. Hi, I'm Lily. Welcome back to Reality Drama Files. If you love jaw-dropping 90-day Fiancé drama, make sure you hit subscribe and drop a comment with your thoughts. I want to know if you think Daniel overreacted, or if Lisa had every right to feel comfortable in her own skin. They tried walking together, but the tension was impossible to ignore. Daniel kept glancing at her from the corner of his eye, like he was measuring some invisible standard she had unknowingly broken. Lisa noticed the hesitation, the subtle tightening of his jaw, and a flicker of disappointment that cut sharper than words. Every step felt heavier, loaded with unspoken judgments. She wanted to enjoy the walk, wanted to laugh about the heat and the wig finally coming off. But Daniel's silence turned it into a slow, suffocating spotlight. Later that evening, he planned to introduce her to his friends. And now, the thought of their eyes judging her loomed like a storm cloud. Would they whisper behind their hands? Would they look at her differently? Lisa could feel it already, and it made her chest tighten. That moment, simple as it seemed, was about to become a defining one that could test not just their comfort with each other, but the very strength of their relationship. Lisa and Daniel had been together for 2 years, sharing more adventures than most couples manage in a lifetime. From spontaneous road trips to quiet evenings binge-watching shows, they had woven a life full of small, everyday memories that felt larger than life. Daniel always joked about Lisa's love for planning, how she could turn a grocery run into a full-blown itinerary, while Lisa teased him for forgetting anniversaries despite having the dates etched in his phone. They laughed, they argued, they grew together, but underneath all that, appearances had quietly shaped the rules of their connection. The wig had been part of that unspoken language. Lisa had worn it for comfort and confidence, a shield that made her feel like the version of herself Daniel fell in love with. It wasn't vanity. It was security, a way to show up for the world in a form she knew would be recognized and adored. She rarely mentioned it, but anyone paying attention could see it had become part of her identity in their relationship. Removing it wasn't just a physical change, it was exposing a vulnerability she hadn't tested before. Daniel, for his part, had always adored Lisa's long hair, the way it moved when she laughed, the effortless way it seemed to complement her energy. Over time, he had come to expect it, almost unconsciously measuring the woman he loved against the image he had in his mind. He didn't see it as unfair, but appearances had quietly become a lens through which he gauged comfort, attractiveness, and even social acceptability. Now, with her wig off, those expectations collided with reality. Lisa wanted to be accepted for exactly who she was in that moment, but uncertainty hung between them, like a thin fog. Would Daniel's admiration survive her short hair, or was it a fragile thread dependent on the mask she had always worn? They started walking down the quiet street, the late afternoon sun making the air feel heavy. Yet, Lisa felt lighter than she had in months. The wig was gone, and with it, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. She ran her fingers over her short hair, feeling the breeze, and for a fleeting moment, she almost laughed at how freeing it felt. Daniel, on the other hand, lagged a step behind, eyes flicking to her in disbelief, like he was seeing a stranger wearing the face he knew so well. Every movement, every subtle tilt of her head was a jolt to him. A small but constant reminder that the Lisa he thought he knew had changed, at least visually. So, your hair, Daniel started, voice tight but controlled. Are you? I mean, it looks different. He stopped mid-step, realizing how awkward he sounded, and Lisa gave him a small smile. Yeah, it's hot, it was itchy, I needed a break, she said lightly, trying to keep the mood casual. But Daniel's eyes betrayed him. He was measuring every strand, every angle, like he was balancing admiration with discomfort. Then the words came that made her chest tighten. Tonight, I wanted you to meet my friends, he said slowly, almost reluctantly. I don't know how they'll react. Lisa's stomach dropped, so all this freedom, all this relief she was feeling, was immediately shadowed by someone else's judgment, Daniel's, and now his friends. Her heart pounded, frustration mixing with hurt. Was she allowed to exist naturally in the person she had become? Or was she always performing to someone else's standard? She opened her mouth, ready to speak, but Daniel hesitated, caught in the tug-of-war between his instincts and his loyalty to appearances. Would he say what he really feels? Or keep it locked inside and let it fester? That question hung between them like a storm waiting to break. By the time they reached the corner near the calf, the air between them had thickened, each step carrying a weight they couldn't shake. Lisa stopped and turned to face Daniel, her eyes sharp, but vulnerable. Do you even think I'm pretty without it? She asked, voice low but trembling, carrying the sting of months spent hiding discomfort under a wig. It wasn't an attack. It was a plea for recognition, for acceptance of her real, bare self. Daniel froze, words tangling in his throat. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her she was beautiful no matter what. But the image of her long hair was still stubbornly planted in his mind. He stumbled, choosing phrases carefully, afraid that any wrong word could make her feel judged or rejected. It's not that, he began, only to realize that nothing he said could undo the immediate discomfort he saw in her eyes. Lisa's shoulders tightened, hurt radiating outward. Every hesitant word from Daniel felt like a mirror, reflecting her own insecurities back at her. She had thought love was unconditional, that small changes wouldn't matter. Yet here was this quiet, almost invisible evaluation gnawing at her confidence. Daniel, meanwhile, wrestled with his own internal conflict, balancing loyalty to what he loved about her before, and his surprise at the change she had chosen for herself. As they walked, the thought of meeting his friends that evening pressed down on both of them. Would they notice? Would whispers start before any introductions could even happen? The tension was a live wire, buzzing with unspoken judgments, and neither could escape it. Every glance, every pause in conversation became loaded with meaning, a test of endurance for emotions they hadn't anticipated. And in that silence, hovering between discomfort and confrontation, one question lingered, unspoken but palpable. Could this simple change really jeopardize the evening they had both been anticipating? Or would it be the spark that finally forces them to face truths they had avoided? When they arrived at the apartment, the energy shifted immediately. Lisa stepped inside, short hair catching the light, and suddenly the room felt smaller. Friends turned toward her, smiles polite, but eyes lingering a second too long, measuring, evaluating. Daniel could feel it, the tiny shifts in posture, the subtle glances exchanged behind hands. He tried to keep his own reaction neutral, forcing a calm smile, but the tension clung to him like a second skin. Every nod, every laugh felt rehearsed, a performance to make it seem like nothing was out of the ordinary. Lisa noticed it all. Of course. The raised eyebrow, The quick sideways look, the way one friend's smile faltered ever so slightly. She felt her stomach twist. Was this really about her hair? Or was it about Daniel, about expectations that she hadn't been briefed on? Her heart beat faster, anger and disappointment curling in her chest. The wig had been a shield before, but now, nothing to hide behind, she felt exposed, both to Daniel and everyone else. Daniel tried to steer the conversation, laugh at jokes a little louder, comment on stories he knew would land, anything to keep the attention off the uncomfortable spotlight. Yet, even as he spoke, he couldn't fully shake the creeping feeling that every friend had noticed a change, and he had. His mind raced. Were they judging her? Judging him for being with her this way? Or both? Lisa met his eyes for a moment, and in that silent exchange, the unspoken weighed heavier than any word could. She wanted reassurance, he wanted control, but neither could fully reach the other. And just as they settled into the living room, one friend leaned slightly forward, lips twitching into a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes, and muttered something that barely carried across the room. But it was enough to make them both stiffen. Would that small comment unravel the evening? Or was it just the beginning of a much bigger confrontation waiting to unfold? After the guests settled, Lisa found a quiet corner and sank into the couch, letting her mind wander. The heat of the day, the wig finally off, and Daniel's awkward glances all collided into a mix of relief and unease. She felt a sting of hurt, realizing that something as simple as showing her natural self could spark doubt in the person she loved most. Every whispered comment, every flicker of judgment she thought she glimpsed from the friends only amplified the unease, making her wonder if acceptance in this relationship had been conditional all along. Daniel, meanwhile, lingered near the doorway, conflicted. He loved Lisa, cherished her, yet he couldn't shake the surprise that came with her change. His mind raced through past expectations, cultural pressures, and the subtle influence of appearances that had silently guided his admiration for years. The psychology of it was complicated. Judgment isn't always conscious, and expectations aren't always fair. He knew he was wrestling with insecurity too, the fear of how others would perceive him and, by extension, the life they had built together. In that moment, the tension wasn't loud or explosive, but it was sharp, a quiet knife twisting in both their chests. Each glance across the room, each attempt to make small talk with friends, reinforced their isolation in plain sight. Yet beneath it all, a tiny seed of realization began to form. Maybe this moment, uncomfortable as it was, could force honesty, a conversation that had been avoided for far too long. Maybe this was the moment where assumptions about love, beauty, and acceptance would be confronted head-on. And as the evening moved forward, unspoken thoughts hung between them. A silent countdown to a confrontation that was inevitable. One question loomed over every gesture, every word yet to be spoken. Could they bridge this gap before it became something that changed everything? Finally, the moment that had been simmering all evening could no longer be ignored. Lisa stood in the middle of the living room, her hands loosely at her sides, eyes locked on Daniel. "You loved me for me, or just for a hairstyle?" Her voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of months of unspoken doubt. It wasn't an attack. It was a demand for clarity, a challenge to the foundation of their relationship. Daniel's face tightened. He wanted to speak, to reassure her, but the words felt trapped somewhere between truth and fear. I never meant to make you feel judged," he said. But even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't enough. His mind raced, trying to balance honesty with the instinct to protect her feelings. Every syllable he chose felt loaded, like walking on a wire stretched over years of shared memories and expectations. Lisa's gaze didn't waver. She had expected this tension, had braced for it in quiet moments, but hearing it out loud made her heart ache in a new way. Because right now, she continued, voice tighter, It feels like what I look like matters more than who I am. Her words hung in the air, sharp and unrelenting. And for the first time that evening, Daniel could see the depth of the hurt he had inadvertently caused. He tried to step closer, to reach across the gap that had opened between them, but hesitation stopped him. The room felt heavy with anticipation. Friends now pretending not to notice, yet silently observing the unfolding drama. Every second stretched, amplified by the questions Lisa had laid bare. And in that silence, Daniel knew this moment carried weight beyond a single argument. One answer, one misstep, and it could change everything between them. How he responded next could either mend the invisible cracks or let them widen beyond repair. By now, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. Even the soft clinking of glasses seemed heavier, charged with tension. Friends exchanged glances, subtle but unmistakable, as if trying to read the invisible storm building between Lisa and Daniel. Daniel laughed a little too loudly at a story someone told, attempting to cover his discomfort. But Lisa noticed immediately. The way his shoulders tensed, the slight twitch in his jaw, it all spoke louder than any words. She felt a spark of indignation. He was trying to shield them. But, in doing so, he had made her feel like the problem. One friend, completely unaware of the underlying tension, leaned in and said something offhandedly, a compliment about long hair and how lucky Daniel had been to meet Lisa that way. The words were innocent, but the timing struck like a match. Daniel's face went pale, the embarrassment flickering across it, while Lisa's eyes narrowed, understanding instantly what he was thinking. The comment reminded her painfully that appearances had been a silent standard all along. Lisa didn't speak, letting the weight of the friend's words sink in, while Daniel struggled to redirect the conversation. He smiled, he nodded, he tried to steer the attention elsewhere, but the damage was subtle and undeniable. Every glance between them was a reminder. The expectations of others, even casual comments, could cut deep when compounded by the raw vulnerability of the moment. The conversation moved on, but neither could relax. Lisa kept catching the little cues, the sidelong stares, the whisper of a chuckle, the pause before someone answered her question. Daniel felt trapped, caught between wanting to defend her and wanting to hide his own discomfort. And somewhere in the back of the room, the question lingered like a shadow. Could they survive the judgment without breaking? Or was this only the beginning of a confrontation they weren't ready for? The evening wound down, and Lisa and Daniel found themselves sitting side by side. The air between them quieter, heavier, but strangely lighter at the same time. They didn't need to speak immediately. The tension had transformed into reflection. Lisa ran her fingers through her short hair, a small smile tugging at her lips, realizing that being seen for who she truly was carried its own kind of courage. Daniel, still processing, looked at her and understood that love wasn't about holding on to images or expectations. It was about embracing reality, messy and unpredictable as it might be. They had been tested in a way neither anticipated, and while there were no instant solutions, the evening offered clarity. Judgments, appearances, and outside opinions could sway moments, but authenticity and honesty were what sustained a connection. Lisa had asserted her boundary, Daniel had reconsidered his priorities, and in that delicate balance, they found a tentative truce that could serve as a foundation for growth. Real relationships weren't built on perfection.